welcome to the Crimson Stitchery, a video channel about making all things that are beautiful and useful. My name is Anushka and you can find me elsewhere online as A Sour Telling, that's A Sour Telling, and that is my username over on Instagram and on Ravelry too. And if you enjoy using Ravelry, please do come and join the Ravelry group. There's lots of really lovely people there and we've got a couple of different chat threads going on. For example, we've got an introduce yourself thread. There's another one about mending where you can share your advice, any thoughts, any favourite tips or techniques about mending. I've recently done a new thread as well, all about sock knitting. And if you have a question or a comment or an idea about how to get the best fit for sock knitting or any preferences or advice in terms of techniques, and you feel like sharing that, that's a really great place to do that. And it's called the Sock Knitting and Fitting Help Desk. So also if you find something a little bit challenging in sock knitting, whether that's with one of my patterns or not, by the by, the thread started with a query about my red brick socks pattern that was happily resolved. So yeah, do come along and chip in there if you would like to. I last recorded an episode for you guys 2 weeks ago, and to be honest with you, I really needed to have that week off. So my aim for the Crimson Stitchery is to do a podcast episode once a fortnight. So it's kind of called a podcast, but I know that in other subjects, podcasts are a bit more informative, or, you know, based on interviews or maybe more like traditional media, whereas a lot of knitting podcasts are a bit more like vlogs and a bit more like life updates and things like that. And that's kind of what it is. My friend Ellie over at Skeindale always calls it a knitting talk show. So I guess it's something along those lines too. So yeah, when I started the Crimson Stitchery, I kind of thought I'd either do once a month or twice a month at the most. Although I do really enjoy recording and interacting with you guys, it's just been a little bit too much to try and fit it in with everything else. So yeah, very warm welcome back and thank you for joining me over in the Crimson Stitchery. Before we get into making, I'll just do a through the wardrobe segment. So I'll tell you what I'm wearing. It is the beginning of May as I'm recording it. We're in the first week of May, the first calendar week, and it's Me Made May. Which is an initiative that started over in the sewing blogging world originally and has now gone over into different craft disciplines and platforms as well, such as, you know, Instagram and here on YouTube too. And it's an initiative that I myself have actually never properly participated in. I don't know why exactly. I've had years where I've sort of considered taking part in Me Made May, but it's just never transpired. And I've had years where I've decided to set the bar a little bit lower, and rather than committing to doing, you know, 30 days of selfies, just committing to a few tasks to do with building a handmade wardrobe. But it's just never really worked out. May's normally quite busy if I'm honest with you. There's normally quite a lot going on, and just kind of committing to an extracurricular activity or, you know, free time activity it just doesn't really work out. And it's certainly that case this week. Things have been pretty full on. I am a part-time student and I work part-time and I have various different responsibilities at home as well. But I'll chat a little bit more about that at the end of the podcast. Anyway, Me Made May, I'm not really taking part, but I thought that I'd pop on a 100% Me Made outfit. I just pulled a face there because I actually don't really like the whole me made thing. Like, I would say it's a self-made outfit, but maybe that's just me being a nitpicky academic. So yeah, let me come a bit closer. Here is a hand knitted cardigan and a handmade dress. I'll tell you about the dress first, maybe a little less headlessly. It's a dress that I've made from a 1950s sewing pattern with a typical hourglass kind of fit, with a nipped-in waist and a very heavily and beautifully box pleated skirt that can be worn with a crinoline or more likely without. And if I hop up onto my sofa, it's pretty long too. And it's made from a really gorgeous lightweight cotton lawn fabric that I purchased for next to nothing, for £1 or £2 a metre. I mean, it's 100% cotton, just putting on my slippers here, 100% cotton, really fine cotton lawn with a high thread count, a gorgeous high quality print in beautiful colours. I have not identified the flowers. I think that they might be abstract anemones, maybe Japanese anemones, but I really have got absolutely no idea. So if you've got an idea about what the print might be, obviously the colours inside are an artistic take, but I'm kind of going by the shape of the petal and also the shape of the stamen and so on inside. Yeah, so I bought it from a little shop in Bradford circa 2013 when I was doing this weekly touring job when I was on the road for a year, and picked up various different materials from around the UK and around Europe. Yeah, so it really cost next to nothing, got 4 metres of the fabric. It must have been £2 a metre. I don't think I paid as little as £1. But anyway, it's hardly anything, and so worth it, like the most beautiful, beautiful fabric. And I made this for myself as a birthday dress a few years ago, I'd say circa 2015 or 16 perhaps. Yeah, I had this idea of just spending my birthday, I think it was like the weekend before my birthday, was really sunny. My birthday is in mid-July. Sunny, just sat, at the time I used to sew in my kitchen, so sat at my kitchen table and just sewed away. And at the time I was trying to implement really finely detailed couture sewing techniques in my everyday dressmaking practice. So for example, the cotton long is a really high quality, so it's not that it was thin, but it was really fine. So the thread count was quite high, but it was just very, very delicate and airy. Like there was no, I'm trying to say, like the weave wasn't loose, the weave was very, very tight, but the threads were very, very fine. So the fabric was still quite thin overall. So I underlined it by backing it onto plain cotton fabric. I treated the seams very carefully. Instead of ziggering them or overlocking them, or pinking them, I turned the seam allowances over and top stitched it down, so it's a really beautiful finish. What else did I do? The zip is hand inserted very, very carefully, and I took a lot of these techniques from a really amazing book called Couture Sewing Techniques by Claire Schaefer, and I will put a link to that underneath this video, which is where I always put the show notes for all videos. There's always just click on the down bar in YouTube and you'll get notes and links and so on and so forth there. So if you're interested in developing more advanced and careful and professional sewing techniques, so if you're an improving intermediate or an advanced sewer, and I would consider myself an advanced sewer because I do have a bachelor's degree in performance costumes. So yeah, I'm an advanced sewer, and I took so much from this book. Not absolutely everything I agreed with. You know, some of the things my tutors at uni didn't always agree with, but there's a lot of food for thought in that book, and it's so detailed. And I remember doing my bachelor's degree and just reading the techniques just for pleasure, really, just to get ideas about construction and different ways of doing things to achieve really beautiful results. So that's this dress, and then this cardigan, I'll show you the back here, is from pattern by Isolde, and the pattern is called Ishnana, and this was another birthday purchase. She frequently does a sale on her birthday, which is in July, just before my birthday in mid-July, and she often does a little flash discount kind of sale. So I picked up the pattern then with 20% off. That was very nice indeed. So her birthday gave me a birthday present too. Yeah, and then the yarn is also from her. It's a discontinued yarn now called Blend Number 1. And I knit this cardigan for myself in around February 2018. Was it last year? Or was it the year before? I can't remember. It was 1 February, and I was really unwell, and this was about the only thing that I could do, knit on this cardigan. And I just showed you the incredible back cable pattern. So it's come out quite different to the one that she photographed, and I'm not going to talk in too much detail about this knit. Maybe I'll do it in another episode. But yeah, it looks a little bit different in silhouette to hers, but it's got that back cable panel. It's got the same cable panel running down the sleeve, just like that, kind of twists and zigzags and tiny little bits of lace insertion too. It's come out a little bit short. I'd rather have hit my wrist bone, and at some point I'm going to unpick the calf and re-knit another cable repeat so that it gets there, because I've got a little bit of leftover yarn, but that time is not now. And then another thing I'll just mention before moving on is it's got half of that cable panel down the front by the button band. So the buttons are absolutely gorgeous. If it will, if it will focus, probably not. I think it's too reflective. So the buttons are vintage plastic buttons with this really lovely, slightly iridescent scoring that gives them a really interesting effect. And as you can see, I use this turquoise thread to sew on the buttons. So yeah, the half of the cable repeat is inserted down by the button bands. And I made a change there too, because on her cardigan it's asymmetrical, so yeah, instead of the patterns lining up like that, they go like that, and that really bothered me, so I rejigged it and made it symmetrical, which was totally fine, and made quite a few other modifications and changes too, but as I said, I might talk about that more in a future episode. I actually don't have like an enormous hand knit top collection, you know, cardigans, sweaters and jumpers. There's a few different reasons for that. The first reason is that I spent many years almost solely doing gift knitting and of accessories, and I have made garments and given them away as well, so knitting for other people, and actually had hardly anything for myself. And then the other reason that I don't have as many like hand knit tops as other podcasters, let's say, is because maybe I knit slower. I tend to knit things on quite fine gauges, and double knitting weight is, most of my jumpers are in double knitting weight. This one is a little bit finer than that. I think there was 25 or 26 stitches per 4 inches, but even more commonly I make stuff out of 4-ply on, so that takes a lot longer. And then the other reason is I did have a spur of making a bunch more jumpers when I was doing my bachelor's degree, when somehow I had more time, whatever that really means. But let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4 jumpers I don't even have in my possession anymore. Actually, they were all jumpers knit from Susan Crawford's A Stitch in Time, but one of them I lost, which is tragic. I've talked about me and my habit of losing knitwear on this podcast before, so let's not dwell on that. So one I lost, one I don't know, I just didn't, two, well, let's say 2, so one I lost, 2 I just decided weren't very me and didn't really work for my lifestyle anymore, and that's because they were 100% more short sleeve jumpers, and that just doesn't work for the climate in London at all. I either get too hot if I wear them underneath other cardigans and jackets, or it's way too cold to have my arm exposed but like a woolly torso core, so they just didn't work. And then the 4th one I unravelled because there wasn't enough shaping in the pattern, because it was ribbed, so it was relying on the ribbing to mould to the shape of your body, and it just did not work for me, and it was really unflattering, so I unravelled it and I made it into a shawl, and I'll show you the shawl on a future episode. So yeah, like 4 garments that I would have had in my wardrobe are out, 1 unravelled, 1 lost, 2 I think I just donated them to charity in the end. Like, they were sitting in my to be unravelled pile for so long that in the end I just, you know, I was moving house, I was like, I cannot take this with me, I'm just going to get rid of it. And then a 5th jumper, also from A Stitch in Time, it's got really fragile under the armpits because it had a yoke knit in kid silk haze in a beautiful lace panel, and it was my favourite, it really was my favourite top, and I just need to go in and reinforce it with something, maybe some stock yarn. I don't have the original kid silk mohair thread anymore because actually the leftovers went into this leftover crochet blanket here that I'm going to tell you about in a future mini short episode video, and so look out for that. But yeah, the kid silk mohair, I think I need to find some sock yarn with nylon in it and just kind of go in and duplicate stitch under the armpits, and then at least that will be back in my wardrobe. But yeah, so 5 jumpers that actually I've knit and have gone out of circulation. So yeah, not as many hand knitted tops as I might be expected to, considering that I've knit for so long, but I do find that does tend to be quite common, and we touched on this in episode 3 of the Crimson Stitchery too, in the International Women's Day chat that I had with my pals Ellie, who's Scandia, and Celine, who is an artist who is not doesn't have a YouTube presence, but you can find her on Instagram. We talked about the idea of knitting for others and kind of giving everything away, and how you know, giving thing away and making for other people being a big spur on towards knitting and practicing the craft full stop, and that's definitely been reflected in my practice of knitting as well. So yeah, me made May / self-made handmade wardrobe, one dress and one cardi for your viewing pleasure. Yeah. All right, so let's move on to what is in my knitting basket. And it's nothing, actually no, there is something new that you haven't seen yet, but let's talk about a finished object. You've seen this hat before. This is the Rowan felted tweed hat that I made for my stepdad, or rather I recently altered because I had to knit an extra wedge into the hat that was, it just looked stupid on him and it needed more length. So I'm just bringing it in here so you can see the texture. The yarn is held double, so it was really fast, and it's really nice and fuzzy with these little creamy and rust and pale blue and bright blue coloured specks all amongst this kind of indigo blue. And it's kind of like almost like an austere hat, being so plain, although with some of those details and that lovely fuzzy texture that I just showed you. And I thought I'd just pop it on. So yeah, you heard about this hat before, but it was still on the needles. It was finished, but it was still on the needles. So now I've, you know, finished it off and sewn in all of the ends, and I just thought I'd pop it on for you there. So yeah, it's a little bit austere and plain, but on me it's very slouchy because obviously his head's bigger than mine, but something about it feels really cute, and I feel like a little urchin, or you know, when schools put on productions of Oliver Twist and they put the younger, you know, the kids in the younger years to play all of the ragamuffin robber little boys that are mates with Oliver Twist, and they always go and talk like that, because I don't know who's really got an accent like that, but apparently that's how they so I just feel like caricature of a 19th century London street urchin. So there you go. Yeah, so I think it looks quite sweet, but you know, it's not for me. It's a little bit stiff, but I think it will flop down with wear, and obviously when it's on someone's head, that fits him better. So yeah, let's count that as a finished object for this episode of the Crimson Stitchery. Next up is the Birch Ply Socks. So last time I talked to you about knitting and unknitting and knitting and unknitting and knitting and unknitting, and then shortly after recording the episode I had to unknit it again, which was quite irritating. But then after that time I made, you know, another alteration into the stitch pattern of these socks, and then it was just smooth sailing and really, really fun. It's a really gorgeous rib pattern, not your standard 1x1 rib or anything like that. It's had a few alterations, and it's come out really, really nice. It was so fun and fast to knit up. So my ideas for, you know, expressing the joy of sock knitting in my building block sock collection has really come through in this pattern at last, now that I'm done with all of the tweaks and I'm on to number 2 as well. So hopefully that will get finished quite soon and I can get the pattern out to you guys. A few of you have expressed excitement and interest in other socks that are going to be coming in the building block sock collection after my first pattern, which was the red brick socks, was released. So thank you very, very much. Thank you very much for your support. I really appreciate it, and your enthusiasm is definitely spurring me onwards and motivating me to keep going. So this is the fingering weight version, and I'm aiming for all of the hopefully three socks in this collection to offer fingering weight and a heavier sport / light DK weight pattern, as well as to be knit from the cuff down and toe up. So I need to go ahead and purchase some of the heavier yarn for the second version of the pattern and then write it up and get it out there. So that was my Birch Ply sock, and next up is another crimson themed knit, which is my Jamesons Tunic, which is my contribution to the Vintage Shetland Spring Knit Along. Vintage Shetland Spring Cal is the hashtag that we're using over on Instagram, and there's also a thread in the Ravelry group for the Crimson Stitchery. And was quite glad that last episode I made the effort of taking this out of the knitting bag and holding it up against my body, because I discovered that the length from the armhole up to the top of the shoulder was actually sufficient, and I didn't need to keep knitting, and I thought that I had loads more to do, so that was really great. And yeah, so last time I was about, you know, here, and it had taken me absolutely ages to do this right front, and then as soon as I started the left front I did it in like no time at all, which is just so typical, isn't it? So yeah, I've done the front. I decided to then join the two shoulders together so that it was a bit more portable and I could take it off some of the million stitch holders and so on that it was on. It's still on some stitch holders and spare needles, as you can see. So it's coming along nicely. It's an amalgamation of mostly one size and then a little bit of the measurements and instructions from the size that is one down from that. And that's something that I do all the time, make a kind of mishmash of different widths and lengths and stitch counts according to what the measurements that I want to take are in order to get a better fit on my body, but also sometimes in order to change the shape entirely, which is what I actually did on the sleeve. So picked up the stitches for the sleeve around the armhole and started knitting down, and I got down to about the elbow, which is where there's another lace section. You can see it's kind of a lace and ribbon and stocking stitch too, and this panel is repeated on the sleeves. So I got up to the elbow, so I'd done loads of sleeve decreases and I tried it on, and something about the proportions didn't look quite right because the body was really loose and a very strong A-line shape. You know, I really dislike comparing women's bodies to fruit, but this is an A line. I think I prefer letters. You know, if you're going to go for that whole pear-shaped business, yeah, this gets a lot larger down to the hips, and there's no accentuation for the midline for the waist. Just kind of ignores the waist really, and goes from bust to hip as a straight line rather than with any kind of, you know, indentation there, which you may or may not have. And so that's the shape of the body, whereas the sleeves were actually slightly tapered and a little bit narrow compared to the body. And when I tried it on, it just looked a little bit weird, like to have the kind of slightly tight but not fitted like this garment is, you know, just kind of narrow a sleeve and then this big blooming and voluminous body. So I ripped the sleeve out, and instead of decreasing down, I decided to increase up, and then hit actually the measurements for the couple of sizes above, and you can kind of see it's gone down there. Yeah, so increasing there, and then that will kind of bloom out a little bit and go more towards Belle's sleeves, kind of tunic sleeves, not exactly, but just kind of widening out around the elbow so it's really loose and over exaggerated in terms of the fit. So that's going quite quickly. I've nearly finished reknitting the larger now stocking stitch portion of the sleeve, and then I will add in the lace panel, go over to the next side, but I might do the collar at some point before that. So the collar, you can see the live stitches are in this needle, and the collar will be a continuation of this kind of placket, slip stitch placket idea, and it acts as a knitted on border, so that's really nice. This jumper it's probably not, I'm not sure how flattering it's going to be because it's so large and loose, and at this stage I do have a waist, and I'm obviously going to be ignoring that, whereas, you know, other garments like this dress and this sweater kind of accentuate that part of my body a bit more, so it's going to be much looser. I think it might be nice with leggings in the winter, but also it's going to be quite fine and drapey because unlike the yarn in the pattern, which is a Shetland woolen spun 2-ply yarn, this is four ply weight, but a worsted spun with I think 6 to 8 plies, I can't quite remember. So it's really fine and slick, and it's got a lot more drape to it. So hopefully it will still look nice, but to be continued. If you followed me on Instagram, I put a bit of a lamenting update there this week because I'd made the mistake of trying it on when I'd only knit a tiny bit of sleeve. And I tried it on over a 1970s shirt dress with a collar and a placket, and it looked like, my partner said it made me look like a private school kid, so it kind of looked like an old Etonian. It was something to do with the placket here of the jumper with the cotton of the shirt collar sticking out that was white, and then this burgundy colour looks like a school uniform. I was like, oh no, I don't want to look like a private school kid. I'm not a private school kid. I'm really happy about the fact that my education was state funded. I did go to a selective school. I went to a grammar school, so you know, I had a really, really fantastic education. I was very privileged to have that, but it was state funded. I did not pay to go there, and nor did any of my classmates. So, you know, many of my girlfriends that I'm still in touch with today, we're all from quite similar backgrounds in that, you know, our parents or our grandparents, in my case, are immigrants and really worked really hard to give their children, and in my case grandchildren, a really fantastic education, and that could be provided by the local grammar school. There was loads of stuff about the school that I struggled with. I wasn't always very happy at school. For many years I absolutely hated school, but you know, ideologically, and now as an academic, which also my PhD is funded by the state because I have a scholarship that's funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council, so thank you taxpayers. You know, that's kind of really important to me, that the state, you know, contributes towards education and research, and giving as many people as possible opportunities to better not just their lives and their family lives, but also, you know, contribute scholarly research that adds towards, you know, academic culture in the rest of the UK. So it's kind of like circular, rather than, you know, everything just always being privately educated and going into the private sector all of the time. Anyway, that's a rant for another day. I'm not going to get into anymore, but I did not want to look like an old Etonian, so that was a bit upsetting. And burgundy actually is not my colour, it's actually my partner's colour, it's his signature colour. You know, he's been known to go out in head-to-toe burgundy outfits, from jacket to jeans to socks to shoes. And I was always like, oh, really, a whole outfit in burgundy? But you know, that's him, and you know, over the years it's obviously rubbed off onto me. So when I tried this on and was accused of looking like an old Etonian or a young Etonian, I was like, oh, maybe it's just the colour, like maybe you should wear it. So then he tried it on, because, you know, we've got a comparable sized frame, although different silhouettes. So this jumper is meant to be a slightly drop sleeve jumper, and it's got quite a boxy fit around the torso. So obviously on him, instead of the shoulder line dropping down onto the top of the arm, obviously like his shoulders, his masculine, much more masculine shoulders filled out that space, so actually it did fit him as well. So, you know, if you imagine, instead of like dropping down onto my frame, as if the shoulder had just gone out there. So it fit him. And there was we're a little bit off in the body, like the proportion of this line wasn't quite right on him. It needed to be at least an inch lower to look a bit more balanced and just nicer. But it did actually fit him, which was crazy. And something about this placket here, with like the broad shoulders, and like he had his dreadlocks out, and I was like, you look like a Viking. He was like, yeah, Viking in a knitted burgundy sweatshirt. So I was quite pleased about that. And I was like, oh, you're just gonna have to have the jumper now. Like, it's obviously yours. You can just be a black Viking in a burgundy jersey. But he was like, no, it's your jumper. Don't be silly. Carry on knitting it. So to be continued. But yeah, like the kind of hers divide, you know, we've got completely different bodies, different shapes and different proportions, but we've both actually like borrowed clothing from each other in the past and in the present. Just goes to show. Yeah, so that's that. if you have wanted to join in on the Vintage Shetland Spring Cowl, I know I got a lot of comments before on Instagram and on my original video where I talked about this book first. This book here, it's really heavy. Yeah, so if you wanted to join in and you haven't got around to it yet, it's not too late. You've still got time to browse the books at All Your Yarn. There's a loose suggested end date for September, so we've still got months to go before the end of the cowl, and you know, possibly might extend it as well, considering that some of the patterns are quite complicated. As you can see, I've got quite a few post-its in here with markers of things I might like to knit. I think one colourwork project I've got my eye on is the Yule sweater, which is a really cute and also unisex striped kind of Fair Isle jumper, and actually it's unisex because it functions in the same way as this garment turned out to function between mine and my partner's bodies, in that it's relatively square and relies on drop shoulders, which, you know, for women are more dropped, and for men, you know, they stand up a little bit prouder if you've, well, not necessarily if you're a man, but if you've got broader shoulders, it just fills out that gap. So, and it's possibly a little bit tighter than it is for women. So yeah, lots of unisex garments. Everything's falling out of the knitting bag. So yeah, if you've thought of joining in, please do. It would be really, really lovely to have some more people join in. We've been having various different trials or tribulations. My problem seems to be unique. No one else seems to have turned into an old Etonian or a Viking through their jumper yet. Never say never. Now those cards are on the table, you might not be able to unsee it. But yeah, people have been having various different issues. I hope you don't mind me sharing, ladies, but you know, one lady had this terrible gauge issue where it grew essentially, and possibly she must have, you know, relaxed through knitting it. And then another lady had a terrible thing where she had been, you know, scanning up her yarn and hung it up to dry, and a dog attacked it and ate the yarn. I mean, just wouldn't imagine. Things that, you know, would only happen to owners of dogs, or possibly small children. So yeah, do come in, join along, join us for highs and lows, and let's knit something from the Vintage Shetland project together. I don't have any mending this week. I have, yeah, just not had a chance to engage with that. But I'm going to bring back my 2 Silky Balls again, and you guys, if you've been a long-standing viewer, you'll recognise these from quite a few episodes ago, about a month ago, my alpaca silk lace weight balls. And now I would like to enlist your help. I'm going to try and make a poll on the video, probably at the end of the video, but if it doesn't work, just leave a comment here on YouTube. But I've narrowed it down to 2 crochet patterns that I'm considering making with this jade green lace weight alpaca silk yarn. So I've got 800 meters per ball, so I've got 1600 meters, so there's a lot going on there. I've got 2 patterns from back issues of Interweave Crochet, and I just can't choose. They're quite different, and I thought, oh, I could just do the swatch for the gauge first and then decide after actually looking at the stitch pattern in front of me. But unfortunately, it doesn't list the stitch pattern for the gauge and tension square on Ravelry, so I'm going to actually have to buy the pattern in order to even be able to swatch, which is a shame, but whatever, fair enough. So the first one is a lace dress, and it's called Peas Blossom Tunic from Interweave Crochet 2010. And it's really cute. I like the fact that it's long sleeve. It's kind of a mini dress. I suspect that the model's probably taller than me, so it might come out a little bit longer on me, which is cool. And I could wear it with a black slip underneath this, or ooh, I could even wear it with like a hot pink or magenta slip underneath it. That would be really fun. Yeah, I'm just thinking about all the slip possibilities now. Yeah, hot pink with green lace on top I think could be really cool, or yeah, just like black or charcoal to be a bit safer. And what's good about this is that it would use up most of the yardage, if not all of it. But what's bad is that it's a big project. It would probably be quite tricky. The stitch pattern looks very fine and delicate, and I've only done like kind of chunky and a bit more basic crochet basically in the past, so I'm not quite sure about that one, although it is gorgeous. And then the second option is the Tumult sweater, which again is a lacy thing that needs some kind of undergarment, and it's got a nice horizontal yoke, and it's a lot shorter, and it uses a lot less yardage. It's slightly cropped, very slightly kind of cropped just below the natural waist but above the hip, and kind of slightly bell-shaped sleeves that I would likely make long sleeves, although they are 3/4 length on the pattern. So yeah, what's good about this one is that looking at it here, the stitch pattern looks a bit more achievable, although I'm not quite sure about the slightly boxy and drop shoulder silhouette. It's not my favourite, although I am making it for Jameson. It's not my favourite. I prefer something with a set-in sleeve. I don't mind a raglan as long as it's shaped properly. I love a saddle shoulder, but yeah, this kind of dropping over silhouette, it's not my preferred, but it does look really nice on this version in terms of how it's weighted with all of the different stitch patterns. Like, they've thought about it really carefully. And yeah, the stitch pattern looks a bit more achievable. It's smaller, so it would be done faster, but it wouldn't use up all of the yarn, which might be a shame. Might be a shame to have leftovers, because I've got no idea what I'd do with it. So yeah, let me know what you think, if I should do the lace dress or if I should do the shorter lace top. Can't promise that I'll follow the final result, but it will be really, really nice to have your input. So please do chip in on that front. Okay, so yeah, no mending on this episode. So let's just go into conversational threads. So sitting on my sofa here, the sun is going in and out of clouds, but I thought I'd just get the recording in because it's really nice to be making another episode for you guys. And I'm having a cold coffee this week rather than cold tea, on a flowery Polish teacup and saucer, which is hand painted, and I really, really love this kind of crockery. To start off conversational threads in this episode, well, firstly, let's just acknowledge that Amaryllis, she is still going strong. Now she's on the last 2 flowers. So you saw the first 2 last time, and now she's on the last 2. And this is my reflowering striped Amaryllis that I'm really pleased about. So it's nice that she's here to join us for the episode. The other half of her, maybe the other quarter. So I thought I'd start off conversational threads with a few recommendations this week of some knitting podcasts. It's likely that you could already follow these podcasts because they, you know, some of them have got more followers than me, but just on the off chance that you don't already follow them, I'd like to mention them because I believe that all 3 of these wonderful ladies are also viewers. So the first one I'm going to mention is the Stitching Over Days podcast on YouTube, which is hosted by beautiful Constance, and I've been following her podcast a little bit recently, but just her last episode just stood out to me so much because obviously, you know, I've had crochet on my mind ever since a viewer suggested crocheting a garment with this lace weight top, and Constance is a crochet master. My goodness, she makes the most gorgeous stuff. She also has a really, really cute style, like adorable, quite comparable to what I've got going on today, which is kind of vintage dresses and cardigans and very colourful and bright and cheerful stuff. And it really brings a smile to my face to see the projects that she's been working on. So do go over and check her out. So all links to these recommendations will be below. The second podcast that I'm going to recommend right now is Kia's pod, and Kia is based in Sweden, and she's also got a really fun and cheerful, bright and colourful style, which I love, love, love seeing. There are, you know, obviously there's trends in the knitting world as there are trends in other worlds, and at one point I felt like everything I was seeing in knitting was so neutral, like white, beige, grey, brown, another type of beige, another type of grey. And you know, it's all very well and good, but just after a while I find it a little bit depressing. So it's really nice to see much more colour come out of it all, and people making really gorgeous, gorgeous stuff. And Kia's also a master knitter. She makes things so fast, and you know, she's got a very warm and entertaining personality on a podcast which she records Swedish episodes and English episodes, which is very generous indeed. So do hop over and check her out if you haven't watched her already. And then the third one that I'm going to recommend now is the Quirky Monday Craft Cast, which is with Kalisha. And Kalisha seems like such a sweet lady. Her joy at making really comes through in every episode. And a really lovely part of her podcast is this kind of positivity movement that she's trying to build through it. And kind of whilst acknowledging that we, or she and we, have days and weeks which can be very, very challenging, but then equally to challenge ourselves to try and find things that are really positive and uplifting and affirmative and share them with each other, which is such a gorgeous, gorgeous initiative and a really lovely way to kind of lift knitting. And also I think it's interesting, like that kind of outright acknowledgement of how, you know, like knitting and making things can keep us sane, or at least be a coping mechanism when things are getting really difficult. And on that note, that's something that I've definitely experienced. I do notice that I find myself doing a lot of knitting or crafting when I'm having difficult time in personal life or work and academic life. I mentioned that I knit this sweater while I was really unwell. I think it was last year. I've had a few years where I've caught really, really bad flus that have lasted, just dragged on for months and months. And the first time that it happened, I was quite shocked because I hadn't been ill like that since childhood. And since that first time, a few years ago when I got a bad flu, I've then got really bad flus at least once a year, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, which has been really, really challenging. The upshot is that I think I'm going to get the flu jab this autumn in 2019. But yeah, I kind of really trivialised it and haven't always taken, when I get ill, haven't always taken it that seriously. Think, why aren't I better? Why am I unwell? Trying to like force my way in to carry on working and doing things, and then when I'm like resting and really like even too sick to get out of bed or get off the sofa, you know, feeling really guilty and wondering why am I not being productive? Why am I just lying down like that? And, you know, not enjoying having time off, but being so unwell that I've had to take time off. And, you know, it took someone to remind me that people used to die of the flu. It was a really, really serious disease. And in a way, our kind of improved hygiene and medical treatments in the 21st century means that it's easy to lose sight of that, and to lose sight of like the fear that people have had in centuries past of living with these terrible epidemics of diseases that, you know, not even having like pain relief and stuff like that to kind of make themselves feel better and get through and recover. So yeah, easy to lose sight of that. And so I made this when I was really sick, and a few other things as well. And I've also engaged with knitting as a way of like stress coping mechanism. So like I did a lot of knitting and unknitting and reknitting of this because I was really freaked out about some deadlines that I had. And I've noticed that for the last 3 years or so, I've made a shawl every year, either in the spring or I did one in the autumn this year. And prior to knitting my first shawl, I'd always dismissed shawls because I thought that they were too big of a project and that I would get bored halfway through, I'd never finish it, they were just too demanding. And whenever I've knit a shawl, I've like become really obsessed in working on the shawl, and just kind of gone. Even when I get to the point where there's like 400 stitches a row, I'm still like working. And I've kind of realized that I put like my stress into the shawl, and it's not always great, because instead of knitting the shawl, obviously I should be doing the work that's freaking me out. But somehow, yeah, like I've done a lot of knitting in times where I've essentially suffered from really poor mental health. And apparently it's Mental Health Awareness Month in May, which I don't know who or where is hosting that, but you know, the internet is pretty international, so things become internationalized quite easily, even though I think a lot of the time things start in the US, and it's questionable there, you know, when things are run by organisations that are based in North America, when they are presumed to then apply to the rest of the world kind of immediately, even when things might be read differently in different countries. That's sort of like, even though the internet is international, like it can end up reflecting America's, you know, cultural dominance over Europe. Again, that's a chapter of thesis that might warrant a separate discussion, but I'm sure that to be honest with you, anyone else from Europe or even Asia would agree with me. Like, what are the movies that we watch? They're American movies, you know, the kind of TV and media that we consume, like most of it is American, and that goes into hobbies and whatnot as well. So yeah, apparently it's Mental Health Awareness Month, and I saw on Instagram that the knitwear designer Tina Say wrote a post about, you know, mental health awareness, and I'll put a link to it below this video. Mental health awareness, and she made a comment about being, you know, a diasporan Asian. She's got a Chinese background, and how, you know, in some ethnic minority cultures, mental health awareness is really negative. You might get told that, you know, you just need to pull your socks up and just get on with it, and to the point where people might not believe in, like, you know, depression and mental illness and unwellness. And I think I'm referring more to yeah, kind of poor mental health in the kind of daily life, as opposed to like serious mental illness, long-standing mental illnesses and diseases that do need to be treated by medical treatment, you know, for example schizophrenia or something like that, you know, just to kind of pull something out off the top of my head. But you know, and I kind of she kind of made me laugh, and it was quite, you know, it was quite sad, and it was something that I can relate to. And I think there's a certain degree of, like, when members of your family have like really struggled, like really struggled to get to where they are today, and give us, you know, younger generations, the kind of nicer lifestyles and more secure lives and privileges that we all enjoy, so that we don't have to go through what they did, you know, the sacrifices that they made, and so on and so forth. Like, there is a certain degree of like, oh, well, you know, you have it so good, we were never so lucky, what do you mean you're feeling down, like, you should be grateful, la 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 la. And yeah, you know, it's true. But at the same time, you're not going to be happy all of the time. And the last few years have been incredibly challenging for me, basically ever since I started my PhD program, which was meant to be something really exciting, but I have found one of the most isolating and enervating experiences of my life, because I'm on my own all the time. I'm on my own all the time. Unlike in the US, PhDs in the UK are pretty much self-led. You're on your own. You don't really have a cohort. You don't have colleagues. At least in the arts and humanities, and at least in my university. You know, obviously there's differences. I understand that people in the sciences work in the lab, and they have lab mates, and they might have co-investigators on the project. But in the humanities, no, it's just you and your stack of books, and that's it. And then you might see your supervisors anything between once per 1 month or once per 3 months, but you're kind of just expected to crack on with it. And no one like people, humans, we do not function well when we're on our own. And also, I don't think that we learn well when we're on our own. I think we learn best when we have peer support and when we can bounce ideas off each other. So yeah, that's been really, really challenging. And part of the reason why I've been enjoying running the Crimson Stitchery so much, kind of just to have the really kind and supportive interaction from my wonderful viewers has really, really meant a lot. On that note, thank you to everyone who's continued to support me by purchasing the red brick socks pattern. People have started casting on, some people have cast off their red brick socks already, which brings, you know, so much joy to me. It's been so cool to see what you're doing, to see what your choices are, and so on and so forth. So yeah, that's been really, really amazing, and I just feel so lucky to have attracted such wonderful viewers. Thank you for your, you know, every comment, every thumbs up that you've given me below, all of the feedback, private messages. Honestly, it's really meant a lot, and it motivates me to keep going. More than 99% of my viewers are absolutely amazing. I've had a few trolls. I've had a few people like leave things that the comments are a bit questionable, let's say, you know, downright nasty, or give me like the thumbs down on the YouTube, which I never really understand, because if I'm not enjoying a video, I'll just close the video. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just won't watch the video if I don't like it. It would just be over, and I won't engage with the person. But to be honest with you, I don't engage with any of the trolls and the negativity. Like, I just don't really care. I think it's their problem if they want to go so far to write me a nasty comment. Like, I think they need to get a life, because I think my life, you know, to be honest with you, my life is pretty good, and I'm pretty happy. You know, in the biggest picture, in the grandest scheme of things, I'm happy. So yeah, like, those people can just go away, and I don't care, because, you know, there's this thing about, I think, the brain in terms that we tend to remember negativity and negative things, negative comments, more than positive stuff that we often take for granted. At least I think I've got tendencies to do that. But in terms of the internet, like, I do not let that happen. So moving on from that, yeah, things are very up and down in daily life. I'm very, very busy with uni. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of deadlines. There's a lot of things to do. There's a lot of things to sort out. And I'm trying to, like, you know, there's potential for my stress level to really be like up here, like over my head, but I'm trying consciously not to let that be. But it's difficult, you know, though I'm not kind of actively bubbling away in stress, just knowing that I've got a lot to do. It's more that I feel I've got dread, you know, paralysing, crippling dread. So it's nice to be doing this video as something different to do. But overall, I think that laughter is the best medicine, and good times with good friends, and not too much caffeine, to be honest with you, but sometimes it really, really does help. So just as a last reflection on something that, on the post that Tina Say, the knitwear designer, said, which, by the way, did give me a bit of a giggle, because her surname is spelled T-S-E, Say, and my auntie is called Tina Tay, so Tina Tay, Tina Say, not the same person, different country, different background, different person. Anyway, yeah, so she was talking about the kind of Asian American experience, laughter being the best medicine. And my auntie Tina Tay recently sent round a video link of a YouTube channel called it's either Your Choni or My Choni, because he's got a few different ones. Basically, he's an Asian Australian guy, and he just does these little skits. He's been doing them for years with his friends, with his parents, and I have been crying. I've been like weeping and cramping up in laughter at he's just so funny. And I think that anyone from like Asian diaspora, you know, second generation or third experience is going to enjoy that. But I'm going to leave a link to one down below called How to Discipline Your Kids, because I think that this one's going to be a little bit more universal for people that are not from an East or Southeast Asian background. If you are from a background where like your parents or your grandparents or great-grandparents like, you know, smack children essentially, which is quite quite bad, let's face it. Like I've been it's not nice, it's humiliating, and it's not great, but it is how children are disciplined and punished, you know, in African countries, certainly in Caribbean countries. Like I've heard the words hot lash go around a lot with my other half's family, and yeah, definitely in Malaysia and Singapore as well. So I'm going to leave that video there. It is a spoof, like don't call the authorities. Like, I mean, I can imagine people who have worked in like Scandinavian childcare and education might find it a bit shocking, but it's not. It's really, really, really funny, and there's some things in it that are quite culturally specific, and my partner that just like couldn't work out why. Like I was crying with laughter seeing a fly swatter on a YouTube video, but like if you're from, you know, if you know that part of the world, it will, and the back scratcher, like it will all just fall into place for you. So laughter's the best medicine. That's a funny video for you there, alongside all of the other podcasts and people that I've recommended. So I think that's going to be it for today. I'll wrap things up, I'll edit the video, I'll get it up to you guys in the week. Don't forget to leave me a comment or vote in the poll if that becomes available on YouTube about which crochet pattern I should use this alpaca silk jade green yarn for, either the lacy tunic mini dress or the short lace sweater top, because I just can't decide. I hope that you have a very lovely fortnight. Happy knitting and see you soon. Bye bye.